Hey YouTube, every single relationship that we have comes with a set of boundaries, certain things that people on either side of the relationship can't do. Even relationships that we don't normally think of as relationships, like it is very much so a relationship with the cashier at a grocery store or a pizza place, even if you've only met them twice and you're not really having a conversation about much of anything other than, hello, welcome to the restaurant, what kind of pizza can I get for you? And then you have, limitations in terms of what either person is willing to do or can't do, as it is often said. Like, I worked at pizza places. I can't make you a pizza with pickles on there because we don't have pickles. And that falls under the category of physical capabilities. In a sense, we'll get more in that in a bit. But another common one, I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And this is one that is often categorized as a can't, which is, I'm not going to go and sleep with a woman outside of marriage. That is something that I believe morally and religiously is right. And it's labeled as a can't when it probably should be labeled as a won't. Well, but you don't have to change. I think labeling it as can't is perfectly acceptable. If you are already doing that, keep doing that. That is fine. But the reason that won't is a more technical term for this is because there is a sense of physical capabilities. There is a sense of, can. So reasons for reasons for can't are, I believe there's God. I believe that he's going to have a final judgment day, and he thinks this is wrong, and so I'm not going to get as good of a judgment if I do it. And then, of course, I want to be temple worthy, so that. And then you get into this area that's more gray, has things such as, I live with my parents. If I do, they'll kick me out. Stuff like that. I'm not going to do that. Although I also don't, my parents are pretty nice. I don't know that they would immediately kick me out. That's not really the point. But that happens a lot. Sometimes it's fine and necessary, and sometimes it's not. We're not here to really discuss that. But those are some of the things that make it can't. But then there's the physical can. There's the physical capability to get myself to wherever she lives and spend the night. I'm not going to, again, but so that's why this kind of falls under a won't. And this is, if we're being a little bit pedantic, it's a won't, but I think can't is a perfectly acceptable word to use for this. And since we're talking about physical capabilities, let's think about someone who's in a wheelchair. It's not physically possible for them to go on a hike. They can't. I mean, if it's one of those ones where it's like a really smooth pathway that goes through the canyon or the woods or wherever, yeah, they can do that. But it's not necessarily considered a hike at that point. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But they're different. And so what traditionally people think of as a hike, going up this steep side of a mountain on a very rocky, bumpy dirt path, they can't do. That's a physical limitation. Now, when we start talking about autism, which I have type 1 autism, then we get into some can'ts that aren't very obvious. Especially for me, you could say mild autism, although that's not exactly the right word and means something different that I don't fully understand, other than not good necessarily. So high functioning is, I think, under the same category of thing. Basically, it means that most of the time I'm acting like a mostly normal person. There's one or two odd things, but you might not immediately think, oh, autism. So, with this, there's a set of can'ts, and these are definitely can'ts and not won'ts. Multiple things at once can sometimes be hard. I work at Dollar Tree. Oftentimes I'll be telling something to the managers, whoever's in the office, while I'm counting my drawer. And sometimes I'll notice, I'm counting a little bit slower. okay, I'm going to quickly finish counting out the money I need to give them, and then I'll finish it. And so I quickly finish counting, and then I finish my story. Life goes on. And I can do some things, like some things I can do 2 things at once. It depends. Hand-eye coordination. That's a thing that I haven't been very good at. I'm definitely better at it now than I used to be. But those are a few examples for me personally, and thinking of things too. The ways that I think of things. I think of things differently than other people, and I oftentimes just can't think of things the normal way. Sometimes I can. Good example of this is how I think the channel is Caitlin Portlow. She did a video, and I have really good discussion with another user down in the comments of this video, but it was about subtext and subtle questions like, oh, those cookies look good, often really means, may I have a cookie? Which for autistic people, we would rather people just be forward and upfront, because a lot of us won't get it. And so the answer is yes, those are good cookies. I baked them. And, I'm with most autistic people, except for, I can understand that stuff, and I accept it because I want to be able to interact with normal people and just interact with normal people and have a mostly normal life. And so I kind of have to do that to interact with these normal people. I prefer when people are more direct, especially since there are times where I don't get when they're not being direct, when I don't get when it's a joke or whatever. But that applies to a whole huge multitude of people now, that you pretty much have to /s or whatever they'll understand to say that, nah, it's just a joke, I'm joking. But, so I try and understand, but I prefer when it's not. And for me, this gets more annoying when it's going the other way. Because with the cookie example, it's probably not a cookie because I'm not a really cookie person, but something else. Some other kind of a sweet treat. Like, I have some chocolate brownies pretty often, you're probably not even getting a chance to ask for one. I'll just offered it to you because I'm nice like that. But, one second. Yeah. Really good example, because this is more annoying for me when it goes the other way. So I was helping my mom put up sound foam, my mom was helping me put up sound foam in my studio. And she wanted to bring her laptop in so that she could listen to something on her earbuds. Or it's actually like a headband thing with speakers in it. She could listen to something while we worked. And I said, there's not going to be room for your laptop in here. Well, but I could just put it right here when there's not going to be room. So you just don't want me to have my laptop in here? No, I literally did not say that. I literally said there isn't going to be room, and I meant it. There is no room for it in here. If there was room, I'd put it there. But there's no space to put it where you can access it and work your stuff. If you want to listen to stuff, that's fine. Use your phone. Well, sort of. I like her to also be paying attention, and that's for a whole nother thing. Don't read too much into that. Maybe I'll mention that at some point in some other topic. But there literally wasn't room. And as soon as she moved her laptop outside of the studio, I put a bunch of things right where her laptop was, because I was already planning to put those foam pieces there and all the stuff that we were working with. It's a small space. So that's one thing that bothers me, is when people read subtext and extra questions into what I'm saying when I didn't say that at all. 99% of the time for me, if it's not the literal words I said, it's not what I mean, and you need to rethink your actions. Please. And so this is an example where a lot of autistic people can't. It's not capable of seeing subtext. Those of you that are, congratulations. You might not like it, but it can be helpful in life in certain situations. And sometimes you absolutely can just completely avoid it, or I forget the name of the user that I was talking with underneath that Caitlin Portnow video, but it's they said they're convinced that it makes people seem like a weak request when they ask that way, and they just ignore those questions in some cases, especially if you're really close to the person. That may work, but it depends. Other areas of can't include some physical stuff, and this is where we get into physical and mental. It's not just about our physical body's capability, but it can also be about our mental capabilities too. Our mental ability to process things directly affects our hand-eye coordination, and then how we're able to play various sports and things, and how far we can throw basketballs, and how good we are at ping pong and stuff like that. So that is another category of can't. But this is where it gets really tough, because there is an area now in this where it goes the other way, and normal people can't. They're not capable of doing things in a different way sometimes. And I don't have any specific examples. You'll see why. But with my mom, sometimes we never specifically said these words, but sometimes we get into a heated discussion about something, and then we end up agreeing to disagree. But a lot of times, we just kind of stop. It's less amicable. We just kind of stop talking about whatever it is and move on to the next thing, even if that's taking space. And because she's going to work on bills, and I'm going up to my studio to do some more writing or whatever. That happens a lot. And in these situations, a lot of times, we end up with a thing where, I'm trying to work on whatever she said. In the moment, I might not be thinking, yes, I want to do what she said. I don't know how. It's often that's not possible. I'm not going to do that because I can't. And then eventually I kind of figure out how, but also eventually she figures out how to do her way slightly differently, and we end up meeting in the middle without even realizing it. That happens quite often. And I don't remember specifically what it was when these things happen. But this is a good example where often normal people, now suddenly they have hidden can'ts because you're different. So there are things they just often can't do differently sometimes it's because they don't know how and they just need to learn. But a lot of times it's because they just physically, mentally can't. My mom isn't very good at remembering things. And this one really bothers me a lot, because she will ask me a question that sounds like she is sincerely and earnestly interested in this thing, and she wants to know this thing. And if someone is sincerely earnest and interested in something, they're going to remember it. That, to me, is a logical given that is not true, especially with my mom. So she will ask something that way. I'll give her an answer, and then later on she asks it again. It's like, you forgot? I thought you wanted to know that thing. I thought you wanted to understand and remember that thing for later, because it was something that you were going to use. But no, she just forgets stuff. She's not good at remembering things. And there's also this whole thinking of things differently and wording things differently too. That is in some ways difficult for her, especially since she doesn't view things as pedantically as my mind does. I mentioned being no hidden subtext or questions, being very specific with my words. There was a thing we had where I said, this thing may work for the microphone at the church. And she kind of took it as will, and then the discussion came, and she's like, okay, we'll have to accept that you know more about the subject of microphones than I do. No. We will not have to accept that because while it is true, we need to accept that I didn't say it will work. Did I use the word will? No. I used the word may, and may is not equal to will ever. I may say there's a high chance or different wording like that, but may, for me, is usually a 50-50 chance or some ratio that is not a guaranteed yes. So that happened. That was like months ago. And there are oftentimes things where, what's the wording? Just the other day, my mom said, hey, the way you said that was like kind of harsh, and it felt like you were attacking me a little bit, and like you should be nicer when you say it. And I said, well, hey, a lot of the things you say feel kind of like you're attacking me. And so I think you should say things a little differently too. And so then we agreed to work on how we say things to each other. And for me, this really, there's tone of voice, yes, but there's also how it's worded that affects things too. That is a big factor. But again, we're at a situation where my mom, who is a normal person, cannot think of things differently most of the time, and can't necessarily think of things normally. And so we this gets into a situation where a lot of times we're almost at an impasse, and there's nothing else to do except have these little disagreements here and there and be sorry, which I would like to say sorry a little more, but I don't for a few reasons. Oftentimes, I'm not trying to bring up the thing again after, we've stopped talking about it, we've had space and do things differently. Or like, there was a disagreement with my mom, and then something like a week later reminded me of that disagreement and reminded me to say sorry, and I'm like, I will. And it wasn't like the thing about it, it was like, oh yeah, this reminds me of that disagreement, I should say sorry. And so I did. And mom was like, oh, I don't remember that we had a disagreement that day, but thank you for saying sorry. So I kind of don't bring stuff up because a bit of time has passed, they might not remember, and so why do I want to bring it up? Yes, I'm saying sorry, but I'd rather just kind of not bring it up and not have to rethink of those things and potentially just make myself feel a little bit sad or worried. And this gets into a tough spot where when things are more tough and stressful for me, especially when I'm tired, I am more irritable and snappy and focused on whatever it is. And I really, really don't like this because there are plenty of times where I snap at my mother for something, and then she says that, or maybe she doesn't say it, but she definitely feels like she is, I can tell that she is a little bit hurt. She doesn't like the situation. And then it's a situation where I don't really get a chance to say sorry because we finished discussing or whatever, or I finished saying, hey, quit bothering me or whatever it is, and she walks into the other room, not because she's trying to get away from me, but just because it's the next thing that she needs to do. And honestly, this is a case where oftentimes just giving me a little space is best. Not always. Sometimes I don't need that. It depends. But that's oftentimes it. And she's out of the room. And I'm kind of just laying there, not really able to do much. I'm not really able to, I'm tired. I can't get up quickly and move. And so I'm just laying there. I want to say sorry. I don't like that I'm being snappy, but I can't do anything about it. I don't have the physical energy to not be snappy and to not say the first thing that comes to mind. And I don't like this. And it's not fun for me. It's not fun for them. Not fun for anybody. So I try and avoid this. I try and manage things so we don't get to that situation. but it's an example of a can't. And it's a can't that might not be obvious, because a lot of times you think, well, you can. You just have to be nicer and act nicer. And it doesn't work that way. I don't have the physical energy requirements to do that. And I wish it wasn't that way. I wish it were different. But it's not. And that's the thing that I have had to slowly over time come to realize and learn and say, okay, I know my limits now. Can't do that. And then in certain situations, hasn't happened very often for me, thankfully, but in certain situations, I have to then state these limits and say, yeah, no, can't do that. I'm sorry. You'll have to accept things the way that they are. Hopefully, I got you guys thinking about things in a good, critical thinking light, because this is really an area where on both sides we need to recognize the limitations of people. Not all normal people are capable of thinking and speaking in a different way that makes more sense to autistic people. They just, maybe with enough training, maybe, but a lot of times they just can't think of things in a certain way. Oh, and also, going back to the example of subtext and questions like that, if you just want a cookie, I'm gonna say no, you shouldn't ask in the form of, oh, those look good. You can say those look good, but also add, can I have one? But this gets into an area where sometimes there is a large amount of fear associated with asking the question. If you are in a dangerous relationship with someone and you are trying to ask questions so that you don't end up causing problems and making things worse and getting beat up or whatever it may be, then asking things in this way might actually be okay. If it does actually lessen the blow of the question and change things a little bit. So hopefully you guys are thinking in a critical light, and on both sides, autistic and non-autistic, normal and neurodivergent. Hopefully we can all get thinking about some of the limitations that we might not notice, and ways that we can kind of deal with said limitations and figure out how to either avoid these situations or do things a little differently in these situations. And remember, autism is a spectrum, so each person acts a little differently. They prefer things differently. But yeah, if you guys liked the video, leave a like down below. I do talk about stuff in this critical thinking manner every once in a while when something comes to mind. But there's a lot of other stuff that I want to do on this channel. You can go check out the variety of other things I've done to see what some of that stuff is. And, if it interests you, consider subscribing. If you want notifications, there's the bell. But remember, you have to turn the notifications on for your YouTube app in your phone settings. More importantly, though, if you really want to support the channel, just go watch more stuff. And discussion in the comments below. If you want to talk about this, I'm willing to have a discussion about this back and forth here and there. Do keep it clean, though. All of my comments are set to approval only, but I'm not out to squash opposing viewpoints and opinions. Just no swearing and no excessive talk of violence or any sexual stuff, and we'll be fine for the most part. I'll see you guys in whatever's next. Bye!